There's a quiet tension that gathers when we are on the edge of change, though we rarely notice it in the moment. I've observed that in these stretches, life doesn't suddenly give us clarity. Instead, it whispers in fragments, small moments of awareness that hint something is shifting beneath the surface. We feel a restlessness, not as a call to action, but as a subtle urging to simply hold ourselves steady. I've noticed the mind sometimes grows quieter, not because the world has softened, but because we begin to resist the impulse to react to every irritation, every disappointment. There's a strange patience that settles in when we no longer feel the need to prove ourselves, when we see that rushing or grasping only fractures the fragile order we are building inside. In those moments, the mind feels less scattered, as if each thought is allowed its place without commanding the next. It becomes clear over time that our emotions are not enemies, yet they are not instructions either. Anger, frustration, even longing arise, and we watch them, sometimes with discomfort, sometimes with fascination. There's a strength in that observation, an energy that doesn't come from controlling the world, but from containing ourselves within it. Seneca reflected often on how the mind can train itself to endure, not by breaking the storm outside, but by remaining intact inside it. I feel that truth more deeply in these quiet, almost imperceptible stretches of tension. We begin to notice how little force is needed to shape our inner world. Strength accumulates not in grand gestures, but in restraint, saying nothing when the world begs for noise, doing less when impulse suggests more, holding still when every instinct pushes us to act. These small, patient refusals are like bricks we stack without thinking, slowly building a hidden foundation. Marcus Aurelius spoke of the mind's power to create order in the midst of chaos. I've felt the weight of that order quietly asserting itself, even when nothing outward seems to change. And yet, there's a strange lightness in all this. The moments of stillness, of holding, of witnessing without acting are subtle markers. They hint at something we cannot yet name, a breakthrough approaching not like a flood, but like the tide creeping over the shore, reshaping everything in ways we cannot immediately perceive. Many of us have felt this, though we rarely recognize it while it is happening. It is only in retrospect, looking back at the slow tightening of our patience, the deepening of our quiet, the steadiness of our watchful endurance, that we realize the shift was closer than it ever seemed. There's a peculiar patience that grows when we are near a threshold, though we rarely notice it in real time. I've seen it emerge in small ways, how we no longer flinch at minor disruptions, how we can sit with uncertainty without reaching for immediate answers. It's not resignation exactly, but a kind of quiet endurance, as though the mind has learned to stretch without tearing. I notice that the world begins to feel less urgent, though the outer pressures remain the same. What changes is the space we allow ourselves inside those pressures. We can observe frustration or desire rising and falling without letting them dictate our next movement. In that space, even a brief silence or a calm breath can feel like an act of rebellion against chaos. We become aware, almost imperceptibly, of the strength that comes not from acting on impulse, but from not acting at all. There's a subtle thread connecting these moments, though we might not name it until later. Our instincts to force, to fix, to escape, slowly weaken under the weight of observation. We learn that endurance isn't passive, it's deliberate, though it often feels invisible. Epictetus once reflected on how the true measure of freedom is the mastery of our responses. I felt that in the quiet. Freedom arises not from changing the world, but from restraining the parts of ourselves that would let the world control us. I've noticed, too, that the mind begins to accept its own limits, the way the body yields to gravity without complaint. There's a strange relief in recognizing that not everything requires effort, that some outcomes emerge not from our insistence, but from the slow unfolding of circumstances beyond our control. In this, there is a hidden rhythm, an unspoken assurance that persistence and patience, when combined with self-control, are quietly reshaping the ground beneath our feet. It's in these small, almost invisible signs, the clarity that comes between storms of thought, the calm in a moment of waiting, the strength found in saying nothing, that we realize a breakthrough is closer than it feels. The mind, when tended with patience and quiet restraint, begins to shift, and even if the world remains chaotic, we can sense that change is already working its way toward us, slowly, like dawn creeping over the horizon. Sometimes I notice how the world seems to rush around us, full of noise and demand, while inside something entirely different is taking shape. It's subtle. We don't always see the work being done within ourselves because it is not marked by outward signs or applause. It is a quiet labor, a shaping of our own reactions, a molding of the spaces between thought and action. There is a strength in noticing the gap between feeling and doing, in understanding that the mere pause, the simple refusal to act on every impulse, is already a kind of mastery. We often think of strength as the ability to bend the world to our will, yet I've come to see it differently. True strength grows in moments where we resist, not where we conquer. It grows when we hold our temper against provocation, when we allow uncertainty to linger without flinching, when we resist the seductive pull of immediate satisfaction. In these small acts of restraint, we are quietly building the foundation for something far larger than our current comprehension. Marcus Aurelius, reflecting on the human condition, seemed aware of this. The world may be turbulent, but the mind can remain orderly, like a lamp lit in the midst of storm. There's a rhythm to these moments, though we might not recognize it while they are happening. We wake each day and perform the ordinary, the mundane, the seemingly inconsequential acts of discipline. Yet it is through these repeated, patient choices that our inner world begins to gather coherence. Emotions may rise, and the heart may tremble, but we observe without being commanded. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, we learn the secret of endurance. It is not a display of force, but a cultivation of inner order, a kind of quiet gravity that keeps the self intact amid everything that might scatter it. I've also noticed the way time changes perception. There's a moment, often only in retrospect, when the shifts we have made become visible, though they were hidden at first. It is as if the mind has been quietly absorbing experiences, learning, adjusting, without announcing itself. Patience, self-control, observation. They seem small, but over time they accumulate like layers of sediment in a riverbed. And there is a certain awe in realizing that beneath the chaos of daily life, a steady current has been carrying us toward a threshold we could not yet name. It is here, in the quiet acknowledgement of our own growth, that the signs of an approaching breakthrough begin to emerge, not as dramatic revelations, but as small awakenings, a feeling of steadiness in uncertainty, a curiosity about our own impulses rather than fear, a sense of power in restraint rather than action. We start to recognize that the breakthrough is not something distant or arbitrary, but something we have been preparing for through patience, discipline, and the simple courage to endure ourselves fully. I've noticed, too, that solitude becomes less an absence and more a presence. It is in these quiet stretches, when the world is held at arm's length, that we begin to feel the contours of our own mind more clearly. We recognize how often our impulses have been steering us, how much of our energy has been spent chasing things that fade as quickly as they arrive. And yet, in stepping back, in allowing ourselves the stillness to observe, we discover an unexpected resilience. The mind learns to hold itself together, not by rejecting the world, but by refusing to be swept along by it. There is a certain humility in this realization. I felt it when I pause and notice that the answers I sought so desperately were never outside. They were quietly forming within, shaped by the restraint and patience I did not always acknowledge at the time. The small practices of discipline, deliberate silence, careful thought, measured action, accrue like tiny weights, slowly strengthening the inner frame. We do not always feel the progress in the moment, but later it reveals itself in ways that cannot be ignored. Epictetus often observed that control begins with the self, and I have come to understand that the most profound transformations are rarely visible until they have fully taken hold. And then there is the way uncertainty becomes familiar. I've watched how we begin to accept what we cannot change, not in resignation, but in quiet observation. There's a strange liberation in seeing the limits of our influence, in noticing how much energy is wasted on chasing what lies beyond our reach. In this acceptance, the mind begins to gather strength, as if each moment of patience and self-restraint is a small anchor securing us against the unpredictable tides of life. Marcus Aurelius spoke often of the mind's capacity to remain orderly amidst chaos, and in these moments I feel that principle come alive, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. It becomes evident that breakthroughs are rarely dramatic eruptions. They are the subtle alignment of countless small actions, countless moments of self-control and measured endurance that finally coalesce into clarity. There is a rhythm to it, almost imperceptible but unmistakable in hindsight. The signs are quiet, a steadiness in the face of tension, a lightness in restraint, a clarity in observing without acting. Many of us have felt these currents without naming them, unaware that they are the prelude to change. And finally, there comes a moment when we notice the stillness we have been cultivating is no longer fragile. It is not loud or sudden, but it has weight. I've felt it in the way our thoughts settle more easily, in the rare clarity that comes without effort, in the quiet confidence that arises when we face the unknown without needing to control it. This is not triumph in the conventional sense, nor is it the end of struggle. It is something quieter, a recognition that our endurance, our restraint, and our careful attention have not been wasted. They have been preparing us all along. We begin to sense a subtle shift in how we inhabit time. Days that once felt chaotic now carry an underlying coherence. Moments of waiting no longer provoke restlessness, but a patient curiosity. Emotions may still arise, but we observe them with less entanglement. Strength is no longer the tension of effort, but the calm of restraint. And in that calm, we perceive the edges of the change we have been moving toward, even if the full shape of it is still beyond our view. There is something almost sacred in these quiet markers of progress. The mind, trained through self-control and patient observation, has begun to align with the currents that carry life forward. Breakthroughs, I've realized, do not always announce themselves with drama. They arrive through small, repeated choices, a refusal to react, a pause before judgment, a quiet endurance when nothing seems to move. It is in these choices that we create a foundation stronger than any external circumstance. In looking back, we can see how the hidden work has accumulated. The subtle shifts, the steadiness in uncertainty, the clarity in observation, the strength in restraint, form a constellation, guiding us toward what was always closer than it felt. And in this recognition, there is both relief and a quiet awe that change, patience, and resilience, cultivated in silence and solitude, are the true architects of the breakthroughs we seek. We may never fully predict when the tide will turn, yet we feel it, a steady undercurrent beneath the turbulence, and we learn that the most profound transformations often arise in the spaces we least expect, through restraint, through endurance, through the deliberate cultivation of our inner world. And perhaps, in the end, that is the closest thing we have to certainty, that the breakthrough has been coming all along, carried not by force, but by quiet, patient strength.